I just have to say this, it's definitely a challenge writing out your testimony. And a lot of preparation to get it to this day. But it's all good. So, I am Jody Weber, I'm the second son to Irvin and Rita, and I grew up on a farm 12 miles north of Shelburne. I had two brothers, Jason and Jamie, and we attended Canwood Pentecostal Church all of our growing up years as a family. And I remember a time early in my life that God brought me through, and I was around 3 years old, and I was playing out at the end of our driveway in the early spring when cold runoff was running through the culverts, and I fell in and nearly drowned. And I remember laying in there, I'd seen an angel with me and knew that it was there. And our dog, Brutus, was barking and got Jason's attention. I remember Jason went and told Mom that I had drowned. They took me into the hospital in Shelburne after they got me out. And when I woke, I took my little plastic guitar and I sang, "Because He lives, I could face them all." The Lord had many people praying for me during that time in our church at Canwood and others. And I know I probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the Lord and those that held us up in prayer. As I grew up, I always enjoyed singing the old hymns, worship songs, and times of testimonies, Sunday meetings. And how what God had done in people's lives is so evident. So many that would share, testify of His goodness. And I always enjoyed hearing them. When I was around between 8 and 10, I think is when I accepted Christ to my heart. Then later, when I was 15, I got baptized in water at Canwood Pentecostal Church. Pastor Peter Nolan was our pastor then in 1991. And I felt that I was to take the next step in my walk with God. And has it been easy? My journey with Him? No. Every day, the challenge. I will share into my testimony about that. God has never let me down. Not once. I went to Canwood School, K-12, and made many friends. My cousin Richard Dion joined me in 10, 11, and 12 as there was no 10, 11, and 12 in Northwest Territories then. During my school years, there were many times where I was tested and tempted to do things, but I know the Lord was helping me make the right decisions and to strengthen me to do so. Our youth group we would meet at school in the mornings at the flagpole and pray before school. It was called See You at the Pole, which we did for a short time. We graduated 1994 from high school, and I started renting land and started farming. And when I wasn't doing farm work, Mom and I would do house improvement projects, which I liked better than working on machinery, and took an interest in carpentry and building. Throughout the years I've farmed, I can always say that God always provided a good crop, even though conditions were not always ideal. We eventually got into cattle and had a herd of up to about 80 head of grain, and we worked all year round. I later met Andrea at a young adults night in Canwood Church, and we both connected, and after seeding season was done, I went and seen her and where she worked and took some Danishes and had coffee with her. We later started hanging out together, and she would come and ride with me in the grain truck during harvest when she was done work. We later got engaged, and in December 31st, 2011, we got married in the Shelburne Pentecostal Assembly. And then in November 2012, Ethan was born and was later diagnosed with autism and TSC2, which I'll explain what it is. It's tuberous sclerosis complex 2, which is a condition of the nervous system that short circuits different areas in your brain. So it affects different areas, and it can cause seizures. And I have that condition, and when we had kids, there was a 50% chance of passing it on or not. And Ethan ended up getting the condition. But God has really blessed Ethan, and he has improved immensely. So I thank God for that. And then in 2014, March 15th, we had Liam, and he has no condition, which I thank God for. And then Erica was 2016, August 19th, and she was diagnosed with status epilepticus, which can be very serious too, with seizures of not coming out of it. But she is doing really well, and hasn't had any episodes since. Well, we had one, which I haven't going to share here. We almost lost her once. I had went to the sitters to pick up the kids, and the sitter had told me Erica wasn't really herself, and she wasn't playing, she was just sitting there just blank. So I went in and I looked, and she was just like a blank stare, and I knew that we had to get her to the hospital. And Andrea was coming back from PA that day, and I phoned her, and she met me there. And we hurried her to the Shelburne Hospital, got her on the table and she went into cardiac arrest almost right away. But I thank God because He had all the people we needed to be there to get her to PA afterwards. And there's certain paramedics and there's certain people like that were just happened to be there, but it wasn't a happen, it was a God thing. And those people that they need to drive the kids to has to be a pediatric ambulance driver. They were there, standing in the hallway. And when we took her in, and they got her stabilized enough to get her to the ambulance, God had that already orchestrated for us to get her to PA, in which later we celebrated her birthday in McDonald's house there at the hospital, I remember. But He brought her through it. It was a very hard time for Andre and I to experience, but I thank God for that. He always has a plan for us, and that He was there even when we don't really see it or think about it till later, and realize that yes, that was a God incident. They just don't happen. So, okay, I lost myself. At the end of 2014 harvest, I started a handyman business and rented my land to Jason, in which I operated for 5 years. And then I got a maintenance groundkeeper job at Shelbrook Housing, which I am still doing. Oh, tough part. December 31st of 2016, our anniversary of all days, I got up, had my cup of coffee, and sat down and was talking to Andrea, and all of a sudden I felt a pain under my my ribs. It was the most excruciating pain I have ever felt in my life. I said to Andrea, there's something wrong. And I went and I lay down in the bed for a few minutes, and the pain subsided. And then she later took me to the ER, which they checked me out and did some tests. Later that day, we found out that there was 80% tumors on my kidneys that were affected, and that I had hemorrhaged larger than what people die from, and that I had to bleed. So I remember laying there in the hospital with thoughts of what I would be doing. I mean, what would be the result of this happening, and the effect of it with the kids and Andrea. And whether I'd be able to play with them or lift them or eventually go back to work. But I remember breaking down in my bed in the hospital, with emotions quite high, wondering, am I ready to go? Was everything in order to meet Him? Many questions like that. It just makes you experience that life is so fragile. And it can flash before your eyes in an instant. And cause yourself to ask the tough questions that you don't think much about until you're laying there in a hospital bed with the unknown outcome. One thing it made me do is read my Bible and pray and seek Him more. Definitely brought me closer to Him to realize how much we need to trust Him. And not only in good times, but also in the times when it's not easy to. When I came home from the hospital, I was not allowed to lift anything over 50 pounds, which would be my kids. And then also had me on bed rest for a whole month, which was more painful to me than the bed rest. And I would look outside and I would think I should be out there doing something, because I don't like sitting around. One day I got up and I said that I'm going to get up, get dressed like I'm going back to work or doing things. I did dishes, laundry, made supper rather than laying in bed all day, but I did rest in increments when I felt tired. I went for many doctor appointments during the time I was on medicine to shrink tumors, which is called everolimus. And apparently the surgeon had said it was supposed to shrink tumors, and it was a Hail Mary of drugs, 10 milligram tablet, and I took for probably close to 4 months. And but eventually, and it cost a lot, so eventually we were covered, didn't have to pay for it, but they switched all my medicines to work with that one drug, which in turn caused me to go into psychosis, and I had to go off of that seizure medication that they had switched me to, and back on my original one. It had me say things and act in ways that was not me at all. And after 3 to 4 months of being on that heavy drug, I was feeling like it was controlling me and killing me. I couldn't make it up my stairs. I had no energy. I just felt like I was dying. So in April/May, I told Andre I wanted to go off that medicine. And I called my family together to tell them as well. My surgeon had told me I had a 3% chance to shrink the tumors in a year, basically, to be here. I'm just going to add this in. When we went to see him one time, when we sat down and he was turned his computer screen around, and he said, "This is what your kidneys look like." And it looked basically like Swiss cheese. There were so many holes in my kidneys. He said, "We can't possibly even operate, we can't do anything for you." And when we finished that meeting, I got up and we walked out. And we're in the hallway, and I just remember telling Andrea, "You know, we serve a big God. He can do a lot in a year." I didn't let that screen shot bother my faith, because I know that God is always in control. And I got off of that drug, and I started to feel better without that in my system. I thank the Lord for his protection over my body and me as well, but also Andre for standing with me in all of this hardship with my health and medical treatments and trips to Saskatoon many times a week and months. And with all that had happened, it had put a strain on our marriage. And in 2017, we came close to being divorced and giving up. And I remember praying and interceding for our marriage, praying for Andre often. I remember the scripture, what God has joined together, let no man separate. And I began to stand on that and kept praying and seeking the Lord, and it seemed like I was all alone in that time. And I remember praying one morning, and I was sitting there in my bed, and then Andrea texted me saying that she felt like fighting for our marriage. And I read her text, and I sat there on the bed in tears running down my cheeks. I instantly expressed an excitement of a yes. I believe that wasn't definitely a starting of the turning of events in our lives together again. In all that we have endured, I can say, even though we don't like going through trials that we face, I have learned to trust God even when we don't know what the outcome is going to be, but to trust him anyway and to commit ourselves and our circumstances into his hands and leave it with him. The hard part for me is waiting. I am the type of person who likes to know things that are going to happen right away. With trusting also comes patience and perseverance too. Today, I am sharing this as a commitment to God. And Andrea, but also those here today to encourage you that in everything that life throws at you, that we serve a God who is over all. And there, even when we don't feel him there, he is right there beside us. He will never leave us nor forsake us. And there's a verse I will always remember, even from my childhood, that I believe I wouldn't be here to share it today with you if it hadn't proved to be true in my life. Jesus looked at them and he said, there is some things that with God all things are possible to those that believe. And Jesus said, looked on him and said, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. And I just want to say in closing that I thank the Lord for all that he's brought me through. He's still writing the story until he calls me home. And whether we don't know when that'll be for all of us, me, but I pray that his plan will be what I have followed each day. And that I may be an encouragement to those who cross my paths.